Well, hello everyone. Again, hi. My name is JJ Asghar, and I'm a developer advocate for IBM. I really do have the email address of awesome@ibm.com, so you can actually get me there. My job is to be accessible, so if you ever have any questions around the space we're talking about today or the cloud native ecosystem, seriously, send me an email. Or 9 out of 10 times, you can find me at JJ Asghar on all the different social medias. I'm on Mastodon. I don't look at Twitter much anymore for obvious reasons. And my GitHub ID is at JJ Asghar also. So, what is this talk actually about? Um, my introduction was talking about how I've spent time in the cloud native ecosystem, but as obviously most companies are going, we're moving into the AI world now, and we need to understand that from an open source standpoint. Enterprises also need to understand how to do this stuff too, right? So I put this talk together to kind of give the terms and understanding of the AI ecosystem. So then we can all have a foundational knowledge. And then I'll show you an open source project called Caikit that kind of hopefully will get you engaged in the space that's all completely based on Python and Flask. So you can actually, if you have any Python knowledge, you can actually dig in and start playing around with it pretty easily. But first, we need to make sure that we all have the right terms. And then from there, we can build on top of that knowledge. So these four logos you've probably seen, or hopefully you've seen at least two of them, which is the ChatGPT and OpenAI. There's another one on there called Hugging Face, and the fourth one right there is Watson X. Most people know ChatGPT because that's how people are asking the AI bots out now to write sonnets about Kubernetes or whatever. Right? By the way, write that in there. It's actually quite funny. And OpenAI is the company that runs it underneath it. Hugging Face is something I'm going to talk about just in a briefly, but then Watson X there is IBM's offering of an AI platform for people to use. One of the reasons why I'm out here to speak about it is to make sure that you are aware of it. And hopefully, if you understand where I'm coming from as an open source engineer, you'll actually give Watson X a real try. The TLDR of Watson X, if you're just wondering, just to make sure I say this to appease my overlords here, is the ability to have a straightforward interface to do your AI work. The core value is the fundamental foundational models that have been trusted and vetted. If you didn't know, there's no way to get the ChatGPT model and the data underneath it. So you don't actually know what it's been trained on. Watson X, though, we will give you those models, or the models and the data set underneath it, so you can see what has actually been trained. In the AI space, in the AI space, especially in the enterprise space, that is a huge value add because now you actually know how your model's been created. So let's talk about Hugging Face. That's that other little logo right there. What is Hugging Face? Frankly, it's the GitHub of AI. If you are looking into the space at all of open source inside of AI, instead of going to GitHub, you go to Hugging Face. They have all these wonderful wrappers and ways to interface with models that people have published out there that has interfaces just like GitHub, and it feels very, very natural. Huggingface.co is the URL that I strongly suggest you just take a look at after this talk. And if you have any comfort at all with GitHub, you'll be amazed how quickly you'll be able to run with that. So again, just to make sure that we are talking about it, because I got to pay the bills. Watson X is the trusted enterprise trusted system. Very, very important. If you will just humor me for a moment and take a picture of that QR code. My boss asked me to put this in here, and I know this is a complete aside, but please take a picture of that and just bring up the website, which is ibm.biz/dev-watsonx. And this is the last time I'll talk about it, so we actually get to have some fun here. Okay, so let's talk about some AI terms. There's a whole ecosystem of terms in this space that you probably don't even recognize or realize what those terms mean. People throw things around constantly, assuming everyone understands it, but they'll actually talk about what they are. Most people think there's all this crazy math that you need to do, right? Or as my daughter says in her great idioms, there are big brain things that you've got to do. If you're just looking to leverage AI and not program the core portions, These are the terms you should be aware of and at least understand where they fit inside the space. Another good way of thinking about it is you don't have to program Microsoft Word, you just need to use it, right? Like you don't actually have to build Microsoft Word from the ground up. You just need to be able to go in there and write a document. So what I'm going to teach you is all the different things you've got to do to interface with Microsoft Word, if that makes sense. So first thing first, right? What is a model? It's the black box of the AI space. It's what most people think of models as a weather model, and that's not too far from the truth in our user case. Usually, there's 3 or 4 models that figure out what the weather are, and they build a percentage off of what they should say. Just like this, your model is the actual brain of what goes on. You shove the information into it, and it comes out and gives you the thing. You create and train these and shove data and to get the desired outcomes. Remember though, like all programs, good data in, good data out. But on the flip side, garbage in, garbage out. So I said data. What's a data set? This is the data that the AI crunches to start figuring out what the model needs to do. Sometimes it's CSV, sometimes it's another file family, but it has to be cleaned data. That's what it reads in. There's a ton of theories about how you break up the data and train the model, but the general rule is a 70-30 split. You use 70% of the data to train it, and then you test it with 30%. You see what I did there? So what, JJ, what's training? It's the actual computation that creates the model. You normally take that 70% of the data, as I was saying, you run it through PyTorch or TensorFlow, which are the 2 major ways of doing this type of stuff now. And then you come out with that model, that little black box. Then you take that 30% of the other data and you test against it. You push it into that model. And the higher you get to 1.0, the better you are of that model. So it actually says, oh yeah, actually I was expecting to get that number. I was expecting to get that thing. So you actually, you use that to test it against it. 1.0 is great, which frankly you'll never get, but the closer you are, the better. So let's shift gears and talk about what types of models there are out there. Because believe it or not, that's all you really need to know about interfacing with AI at a more technical level is that those 3 terms. But now you need to understand all the different types of models out there so you can understand which one takes advantages in different spaces here. I'm going to go through the ones that you'll probably see in this space the most than anything. And let's start that going. Natural language processing, or NLP, is the ability for computers to understand human language and process it. This is the chat GPTs of the world, right? It's a hint of the natural language processing. The space of most people have exposure to. It's the, hey, chat GPT, give me a sonnet about Kubernetes. Again, I'm telling you, it's actually quite funny. But they're broken up into smaller chunks. So let's talk about a couple of them. One of the neatest parts of Hugging Face is that transformers module, right? Like you see right there. Yes, that is Python. And yes, that is all you need to do to use the transformers module from Hugging Face to run something called sentiment. So what this actually does is it creates a pipeline, or imports that pipeline, creates a classifier, and then runs that little line of, I've been waiting for a Hugging Face course my whole life, which I stole directly from the docs, and prints out whether it's a positive or negative. This simple example leverages the model from Hugging Face, which is a default model of what they consider to be default without figuring out someone else's, and then runs sentiment against it. The advantage of Hugging Face is it takes all that other harder work out of it and then turns it into literally 4 lines of code. This actually comes back with a 0.96% positive sentiment, which if I have time, I will run on my laptop also, but we'll get to that in a second. Or actually, we're going to do it right now because I didn't see my slides properly. Give me 2 seconds here. And I did not have that up and running. So what I was going to go ahead and do, we're going to walk through the slides, and I'm going to come back to this in just a second, and I'll get to, actually, you know what? I'll do this all through Caikit instead. Summarization. This is just as it sounds, right? This is another natural language processing, which is NLP. And this basically takes something and summarizes it for you. You've probably seen summary bots on Reddit or some other TLDR bots you've seen out there, really long Wikipedia articles that they throw through AI and it comes out with a bunch of bullet points. That is exactly what a summarization does. In the US, we had something called Cliff Notes, which was a way to like take Oliver Twist, by Charles Dickens, which is insanely huge. And they give you a book beside it with all the summaries inside of it, it's a little yellow book. It's called Cliff Notes. That's exactly what it does. This is just a programmatic way of making that happen. And honestly, I wish I had summarization in high school too, because it would have made my life significantly easier. And that's all. Oh, and basically, there's a transformer that just does that too, but I do not have an example of it because this is text generation. Text generation is exactly what it sounds like, right? This is what most people interface with ChatGPT, but you can run this on your actual laptop. Now, think about that for a minute. I just told you don't have to use ChatGPT anymore. You can just use these 7 lines of code and run with a model called Distinct LGBT2 the ability to actually generate some code for you. And we're going to go ahead and play with that here in a handful of moments. But as you can see, that's not a lot of code, right? That's actually really easy to get done. And I will say, though, you will quickly discover that the different models have different levels of positive, negative sides. And I actually asked it, what is a developer advocate? Or I said, what is a developer advocate does? And it went into a really weird tirade about how a developer advocate's a CIA agent and works for President Obama, running around the world, trying to steal secrets or something like that, which was very bizarre. I don't think it knew what a developer advocate. I thought CIA agent, kind of funny. See what it does today. It's fun to. So we'll keep going with that. And again, we'll play the text generation here in a moment. I apologize for not already having this set up. Okay, let's talk about the next one. We talked about NLPs, right? That's the text thing. That's what most people interface with. The other side is computer vision. And this is exactly what it sounds. Computer vision is the ability to train models to find things or identify them. Though this is where the slippery slope of AI, in my opinion, comes up. This is where all the sci-fi movies out there that you've seen, or science fiction movies you've seen, we've been starting to warn us about. When we start training computers to look for very specific things from cameras and identify them, it can go dark very quickly, right? Like we can have AI look for a car accident on a highway and then dispatch EMS to save someone's life. Or it can do facial recognition looking for someone very specific and then bad stuff happens, right, from the government. Like there is a very slippery slope here. But we're not talking about that as a macro level, but it's important to recognize that this is where that space comes in. Let's talk about what image segmentation is. And I'm going to do this inside of Caikit here in just a moment. Again, I keep talking about Caikit, haven't actually shown it to you yet, but this is what it looks like with dark mode on. And what it does is literally figures out the two things inside the image and splits them in half, or in this case, in half. You've got the puppy and the cat or the kitten, right? And it figures out what it is, and then it says, okay, these are the two pictures now, which is really nice. It literally segments the image for you. Image classification. This was the one that before ChatGPT took off, if you remember the TV show, if you had the chance of seeing it, called Silicon Valley, hot dog, not a hot dog. That's that joke right here. And believe it or not, this is still a running joke in this space. They literally have models that do hot dog, not a hot dog, and tell you what kind of hot dogs they are now, which is pretty interesting. People have trained these things so well. It's not only a running joke, it's literally part of the culture now. So be prepared to see that in this space. Object detection is the next one, which is obviously it tells you what these things are. So when you start getting into the looking for a car accident inside of a picture of a camera, it will be able to say, hey, there's a bunch of smoke here. That's probably a bad thing, right? This one, it could identify all these different things inside of it, which is wonderful, right? Like it tells you where the chair is, the laptop is, where the bowl is. Keep that bowl in mind, where the bottle is, et cetera, which is very, very important. Okay, so we've talked about computer vision, we've talked about NLP. Turns out you can smash these things together, which we call multimodal. They can do multiple things, hence the name. Remember, models are built on and trained on data in each of our black box of sorts. So let's combine these tasks. This is one of the most famous ones, which is the text to image, where this is, if you don't remember, that is the Dolly image up in the top left-hand side there. Create me an armchair the shape of an avocado, and it comes back with a bunch of pictures like that. John Oliver actually has a great little uh, joke on his TV show last week tonight, where he created a bunch of images about him falling in love with a head of lettuce or something like that. Like you basically ask the AI to build a bunch of images around it. There are some very interesting things that come out of it, but it is important to recognize that this is this is a space that is more of an advanced level. They do have multi models on Hugging Face. I have not tested them recently, but I know that this space is moving very strongly. So next one is text to video. This is actually a video from NVIDIA, which was literally give me a picture of a stormtrooper vacuuming a beach. I have not been able to actually get my hands on the video, but it is very bizarre, right? I literally asked for it, and the AI came back with a stormtrooper vacuuming on a beach, and that's weird. And the dude walks around and just like vacuums the sand. It's very, very bizarre. So again, that's the limitation is of what you are trying to ask and the model that you've been trained off of. So it's important to know. Okay, so with all that, that's the general space of this. So let's start actually playing with Caikit here. So here we go. Here's the Caikit demo. If you have not seen it yet, if you go ahead and just Google Caikit right here, Caikit. This is the Hugging Face demo that I'm going to be doing. It's on GitHub. Hopefully, I'll be able to send this out later, or again, just email me at awesome@ibm.com. I can get it to you. This works on your laptop. Obviously, I've pre-baked a couple things. Here it is right here. And just to prove to everyone, as you see, there's a bunch of PY files in there. It is based off of Flask and another little app, right, which is nice. But I'm going to go ahead and run it right now. And let that go for a second. And if I go ahead and bring this up, literally walking through the instructions here. I've already moved the models over, and I start the PY app, and then we'll see that here starting here in just a second. There we go. I'll go ahead and open this up. And this should look relatively familiar. As you see, when that was on the dark mode, it's the exact same thing. And here's that sentiment. As you can see, we have the sentiment, IMS classification, object detection, object segmentation. So I love talking to an audience, AUDINCE audience. I can't see. Yeah, I can't see you. Yeah, you get it? No. Okay. Anyway, point being, as you can see, it says it's positive, right? It's like, yay, it's a positive thing. It's pushing it through it. I hate talking to it. Of course, it's going to be negative, right? Like if we were actually in the same space and talking about it, I would actually ask for a couple more options. But you see the whole point, right? Like you give it a sentence and it figures it out which way it went. Of course, this is just a web GUI in front of the exact same 4 lines of code that I showed at the beginning of this. But that's you get the point. You can also change the models on here. So when you start tuning the models, you've trained a model with a bunch of data. I didn't talk about tuning because 9 out of 10 times, unless you're a data scientist, you're not actually going to tune models very often, unless you use something like Watson X, which is a different conversation. But inside of Caikit, when you start putting other models in there to figure out which one's better, you can actually drop this model ID down to multiple different versions and try against it. So let's just take, for instance, this image classification, where we're going to go ahead and classify a couple images here. I'm going to go ahead and come over here, and I'm going to go to pictures, and I'm going to take this one right here. there is me, and what look, it's already done it. It's figured out that there's a T-shirt inside of this. There's a comic book. That's not supposed to be there. It thinks that this thing's a neck brace, and or there. This is also a bolo tie, right? Like it's nice to see that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and detect those objects inside of it too. We'll take that exact same image right here. And as you can see, it takes a little bit longer. Gradio is just built off of Flask, if you're wondering. But there we go. That was what, 6 seconds, which is pretty good if you think about it. And it figures out there are 5 people actually in this picture, which is true, which is really impressive when you actually see all the different people back in the corner. It figured out the little bowl there, which I think is pretty cool. Figured out there's a plant, and obviously there's a person there too. But it didn't identify like the badge and things like that. But that's one of the things you can start training the model to do more and more, which is nice. And then finally, let's take this image segmentation real quick, just to prove that everything is working. And this one actually takes a little bit longer because it has to compute more, right? Like it just doesn't have to see it. Now it actually has to like cut it out and figure out where all the different portions are. So it will take it here in just a second. Come on, don't make a liar out of me. I know, and I realize I'm coming up on time. I want to make sure I get this last little bit in here. So, of course, it usually takes 20 seconds, and now, of course, it's taking 30. It's because it's because I'm streaming and talking about this, of course, right? Right? That's how it works. Come on. Come on. I know you can. There we go. As you can see, it cut me out. It figured that out. It figured out that that's another person right there. It figured out there's the bowl. Again, I do love that little bowl. Where is it? Potted plant. There it is. It actually figured out what that little bowl was and actually cut that out too, which is pretty neat, right? So again, just so you can see it, this is something. So all that stuff inside of Hugging Face, this wraps things around so much easier. And if you haven't actually seen Hugging Face yet, Hugging Face, there's Hugging Face right there. There's a whole world of stuff inside of it, but this is an interface in front of Hugging Face, so you can actually do some fun stuff. Yay! Okay, so let me go ahead and change my screen one more time back to this one right here. Right here. Where'd it go? Oh no. 2 seconds, I'm sorry. This is what happens when you're playing with stuff here. And there you go. Thank you so much. Again, awesome at IBM.com. And please, if you can, take a picture of that QR code that proves to my bosses that y'all are actually paying attention to what I'm saying, or go to that IBM.biz dev-watsonx. It is, again, how we track to make sure that I am actually doing and helping you. And if I can ever help you for any reason whatsoever, whether it be in the AI space, the cloud native space, frankly, Python space, that's my job. So go ahead and reach out. Thank you.
The QR code has been scanned. No worries here.
Yes. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Stunning speech. A few questions, as always, a couple of questions, if you don't mind. First and foremost, whilst I was rooting for you for the processor to make it under 30 seconds, right? What is your system? What is it like? I mean, what's the system requirements that needed to run a model like that?
Actually, I believe my laptop, which I ran it all locally on my laptop, is a 2.4, or it's a MacBook Pro 2019.
Right. So it wasn't cloud, so to speak. So it was a local installment. So and it works like this.
Yeah. Every like that's the best part about it, right? Well, that maybe I should make that more clear for my next talk when I do this one. Is that the advantage of a model is if you've already built the model, which is what we're doing from Hugging Face. We just took one model down from the open source space and ran it locally. We don't have to do any computing. We don't have to do any training because the model has already been trained. Right. It's just a black box. If you will, it's a compiler, right? You're just shoving the picture into it. It compiles the picture, figures out what happens, and gives you the information outward. So it doesn't actually have to do anything. It just has to compute it. It doesn't have to train it, which is what you need the GPU for and all that jazz. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. With that, you also, of course, mentioned about OpenAI and ChatGPT, which is based on GPT 3.5 or GPT-4 model. But you also shown you showed the GPT-2 model. Is that an
Yep.
official one? I mean, or is it the one that community came up with? And how different are they?
Significantly different. They are. It is the difference between talking like Windows 95 and Windows 10. It is a massive ecosystem of difference here. Completely different like they open sourced. So when OpenAI was going out into the world, of course they wanted to open source their models. They wanted more people to use it so that people saw it. At 3.5 is I think the one that I think you can actually get 3.5 now. But the idea is that it's so far behind the one that they use on the web for you to pay for them that you get enough of an idea of what's possible, but nothing like what is actually on their service. So it's so many generations behind that you don't want to build your business off of it because you're just going to be behind the curve, so far behind the curve. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yes, definitely. That makes sense. You also, of course, mentioned, I mean, for someone who want to get into this with Python, I mean, you mentioned there's PyTorch, apart from the Keras, right? There's TensorFlow.
Mhm.
What would be the easiest way for somebody to get into this? What are other frameworks possibly?
Yeah, being that we're at a Python conference, and I'm only assuming that most people are proficient in some level of Python. Uh, Honestly, PyTorch is the way you want to go. The interfaces that you would use as a Python developer is surprisingly easy, but the challenge is the amount of computing you need to do something big is a lot because it takes a lot to run PyTorch at an efficient level, especially to get the feedback loop that you want to do training models and things like that. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of YouTube videos on how to start up inside of PyTorch and get that stuff going. Um, there's a gentleman named Neural9 who is a YouTuber. He is unbelievably I think he's Austrian, I believe, and he is very very good about teaching this stuff. And he's also a Python developer too, and he writes a couple books around it. So he has the Python mentality, and he digs into the ML side of it enough for you as I consider myself an intermediate Python developer. Um, I feel comfortable watching what he does and being able to emulate it relatively well, so I can build on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And it also, of course, feels that, well, predominantly AI community is built upon, or built with Python developers, so to speak, or with Python for
Yes.
that matter. Do you think, well, whilst again, it is a sort of a stepping stone, but does a proper AI developer need to know any other languages?
Yeah. Yeah. It depends.
Right. No, I mean that
It
makes
really
sense.
depends. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so the challenge is that the AI ecosystem is still in its infancy, right? Like there's still so many different portions of the AI ecosystem that is taking so many different directions. And just like how the Linux ecosystem, right? When we start moving to Linux and we start using Linux for the cloud, you needed developers who were writing web apps. You needed operations engineers to run the infrastructure. You needed really, really smart people to build Kubernetes, right? The same thing is happening in the AI ecosystem because there's so many different portions of the AI ecosystem that needs that level of focus to be skilled. But we need the general language we're going to be interfacing with AI models is going to be Python because the ramp is fast. There's a lot of Jupyter notebooks out there that what is it called? Data engineers are using with just like pandas, right, to figure stuff out. Well, it's a very easy jump into the AI space, because now you take all that info and all that stuff you've been doing on data science, and now you just shove it into a model and get that information out. And if you build that interface into the Jupyter notebook, all of a sudden now you have all of these data scientists that can leverage that, right? So Python is going to be the natural language that we're all talking, but it depends on where you focus and what your skill set is. Um, as an OpenShift user, right? Like I spend my time using OpenShift as my main computing platform. There's a whole AI ecosystem where I can put GPUs on my worker nodes on OpenShift to be able to make things happen and do training. Now, that is actually a lot of work. I got to know Kubernetes. I got to know OpenShift. I got to know how to get get a GPU working inside of that. And that's just because I'm an operator, right? But if I was just a data scientist, I just give JJ the Jupyter notebook and be like, hey, go compile this thing over on your OpenShift cluster and give
Do
me
your
the
magic.
results,
Yes.
right? Exactly. So hopefully that gets the point across, is that the stack is so massive that, as they joke, right? What is all the web? Just a bunch of Bash and Python glued together. Well, that's all the AI ecosystem is. It's just a bunch of Bash and Python put together that we're just running.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, JJ, thank you so much for the speech. I mean, indeed, I mean, I hope that it is going to be a stepping stone for a lot of us into this brilliant world of AI. And now we know that we do not need to use ChatGPT for everything. We can actually run one ourselves on our computers, on our laptops. So that's wonderful. Thanks so much again.